Welcome, residents, to the Dr. DC podcast. My name is Dr. DC, and across the airwaves from me is substitute producer Josh Gill.
Hi, guys.
And we're coming to you a few days late. This was a crazy week. Everyone got sick. No one had time. But now you get some like weekend podcast. Normally you blow through the episode on a Wednesday. There's a special weekend treat for you. Josh, thank you so much for hopping in and helping out.
Oh, it was my pleasure, man. I'm happy to do it. I mean, what you don't know is every Wednesday when I'm going through the episode, I'm sitting there having conversations and yelling right back at the two of you. So this just gives me a chance to do it in person.
That's yeah, that's fair. That's fair enough. That's like me with blank check. I'm usually pretty good, and then as soon as I have a dissenting opinion, I'm pretty loud in the car.
Well, it would be a whole lot better if I remembered in the moment that there is an avenue to share my opinion, and it's the doc scored, but I always seem to forget that until like 2 days later. I'm like, oh, yeah, I could have definitely put that in there and contributed to the conversation.
No, it's fine. Yell it 2 days late. I love that. Listen, this is the late episode. I can't come out anti-late at this point.
No, there'd be no point.
Before we hop into stuff, just because you aren't on the show all the time, what have you been up to? What are you reading? Like what's geek wise, what are you taking in right now?
Oh man, so geek wise, I've been pretty much leaning into the full nerd life since June.
Sure.
So right now I am in the middle of watching Sandman and Harley Quinn.
Very nice. I just finished Sandman today.
Yeah, so we just finished about 10 minutes ago. Actually, my brother and I just finished episode 2.
Nice.
So I am all in on it. It looks amazing. Everything I've seen so far is just stellar.
Yeah.
I mean, Harley Quinn is great and funny and
so funny.
Completely irreverent. I love it so much. But yeah, so watching, that's where I'm at there. So the big thing since June is Jackie got me a Switch for Christmas.
Nice.
And my brother got me Breath of the Wild. And so I have been running around playing Link and climbing cliff faces and jumping off and seeing how far I can jump without dying.
That's a big game even by Zelda standards.
Yes. But so I actually threw this up in the doc scored a while back, like kind of talking through the last era of video games that I played.
Right.
And the things that I really enjoyed. And Breath of the Wild was the unanimous, this is the game you have to get.
Sure. Right.
So far it does. It speaks to me. I've logged probably 100 hours and logged about 5% completion. Just because I get,
crazy.
this is why I could never play like Red Dead Redemption 2, because I would get distracted by the dog just constantly.
That's what happened to me. I mean, it took me forever to even just finish the story.
Yeah.
Of Red Dead Redemption. It was too much.
Yeah. But comic books, why we are actually here, right? I suppose we can talk about those. Right. So like the big things that I'm just really digging on right now, Nightwing is still great.
Yeah.
I am loving Wally as the Flash. Like, I miss Barry. I want Barry back. I'm always going to be a Barry apologist, but like the Wally run right now is really cool.
Yeah.
Probably the one that I just get excited about every time I see that is this week's issue is Action Comics.
Yeah.
Like this,
that Warworld saga has been so solid. I can't believe
so good.
I mean, I'm always a little bit behind just because things take a while to get up here, but
sure.
It's almost done. Like it's almost over now. I think like the second last issue of it just came out this past week or something like that.
Well, and okay, so I'm even further behind than you are. But I keep seeing things where Superman is back on Earth now for Dark Crisis and everything else. So I'm like, okay, so I really need to get caught up. But yeah, I would say on average I'm about 6 weeks behind publication. Just
It really
Life.
varies. Sometimes things get so backed up that I end up like that far behind, and then I it happened once where I got like 2 months of comics all at once, which was like a real hit to the wallet.
Yep.
And then, of course, they're comics, right? You blow through them. So like 2 days, I read everything, and then I was like, okay, well now I'm just back to waiting again.
So in the spring, I got caught up. Like I was current on everything by the time like April hit.
Right.
Because I will read every night before I go to bed for a little bit. But then when I travel and I'm on an airplane, that's all I'm doing on the airplane is reading comic books.
Right.
And I traveled so much through March and April that I got caught up. Well, I have another round of that coming up. I'm like, okay, cool. So we're going to be caught up by the time October hits.
Hell yes. Yeah.
So I am not nearly as far behind as I was at that point.
Yeah, I'm enjoying obviously Action Comics. Nightwing's great. I'm excited / dreading reading the sort of end of the Swamp Thing, because I've really been enjoying that.
That has been really good.
It's been really solid. Do you know what? It's funny when this like second arc, like second season, kicked off. The first couple of issues, I was like, I don't know, something's not happening. And then the last 3 of them have been so good that now I'm like really upset that book is ending. Poison Ivy's been really good. I'm liking that one. Yeah, there's some good stuff out there. I gotta say, I'm digging the Sword of Asriel.
Okay, so I haven't got quite to that point yet. Like
that's pretty new. They put out a one-shot that I think has the Asriel stories from Urban Legends in it.
Okay.
And then it's the start of like his series or whatever.
Okay. Yeah, so I read that. I read his little stories there in Urban Legends. That was really cool. And I mean, before that, the last thing I remember him being in was Justice League Odyssey series.
I think that was it, basically.
Okay. I mean, I loved him in that. It was definitely a different take
cool
on it.
To send him to space, especially because that whole thing was about those like cults of personality popping up on planets. So having him with the whole like religious indoctrination background was pretty cool. Yeah.
No, that was pretty cool. I enjoyed that series quite a bit. So I don't know. I'm stoked to see more of Asriel. I'll pick that one up.
Nice. That's awesome. This is what happens when producer Richard's not here. We're doing things slightly out of order. I love catching up, but
we have a review.
Oh my God, are you doing this?
We do. We have a review. It's a 5-star review. I don't know if you know this or not.
Well, good. I'm tired of putting up the lesser ones.
It's 5-star review number 179 to 186. Am I assuming there's 7?
Yeah, there are. This is like a collective one. It's the same text posted in like 7 different places.
Okay, so whoever is behind this is a fucking mensch.
Yeah,
just
no kidding.
Great person. But yeah, it is various comic shops Google reviews. So 7 different comic shops have the following. Great comic shop to find all the titles you could ever want from listening to the 5-star podcast of Dr. DC, an insightful podcast full of DC lore and comic relief.
That's amazing. Let's just keep spamming Google review pages. That's my
Google reviews, Yelp reviews. Hey, the more places we can spam, the better.
I love that, and it's a quantum leap forward in our review numbers. So I'm happy with that as well. So thank you very much for the lovely 5-star reviews. Keep that going, because we need to basically back Richard into a corner, get to 200, and force the Lord of the Rings on him or from him, whichever makes the most sense.
I think both of those are accurate.
Oh my God. Yeah. So for this week, we were going to have guests. We were going to talk about the Bat family. That's being postponed. We're going to find another time to have Ed Greer and Ron Swallow from the Greatest Pod. We're going to get them on. We're going to do that theme with them because that's the thing they wanted to talk about. So we're doing a slight grab bag episode. I had fun with this one last time, but we're doing another dip into like the random Reddit questions where basically I found DC questions on Reddit, not directed at us, but just into the ether, and I've stolen them for content.
Well, as we have established, Reddit, where everybody's nice and nothing is ever evil, right?
Oh my god. Oh my god. He's here. It's happening.
All right. So with that, Doc, first question from Peter Queen.
Okay.
I picked up Green Lantern Earth 1. I really enjoyed it. I haven't read any of the other published Earth 1 books, but my question is, are they all connected? I know it's a separate new universe than other DC continuity, but do all the Earth 1 comic characters inhabit the same universe? Like, have they interacted, or will it be future crossovers like an Earth 1 Justice League?
That's a great question. So first of all, we have to shout out Green Lantern Earth 1. This is one of producer Richard's favorite comics. It might be my favorite of the Earth 1 comics. Josh, you've read those ones?
Yes, and it is absolutely my favorite as well. After the Green Lantern Earth 1, parts 1 and 2 were amazing. Totally. And definitely stand above the rest. The Batman one was really cool. I enjoyed the first Teen Titans one, but the Green Lantern one is definitely the best of the run.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like so atmospheric, and we've talked it to death on the show before, but such a good book. But yeah, so this question is, are all of these Earth 1 books on the same Earth? So the Earth 1 property in general was like a way to do kind of just like variations on origins and stuff like that. It was sort of self-contained, not so Elseworldsy that it was like, here's like Samurai Flash or something like that, but definitely had that kind of vibe of just like they're kind of off their own little contained things. And each of them also has been contained from each other. Superman Earth 1 stuff happens there. Those events don't get referenced in Batman Earth 1, or don't get referenced. I mean, in the case of Green Lantern Earth 1, that takes place in like a sort of like sci-fi industrial future. It's not even like meant to be like 2020 or whenever it came out. So all of them take place in their own little bubbles, in their own little spaces. But if you look at the map of the multiverse, they all are on Earth 1 with the number 1. So there's this kind of, as messy as continuity gets, this is somehow among the messier. You'd think it'd be clean because they just don't interact with each other. But there's this sort of like ambiguous wording on the map of the multiverse in the Multiversity Guidebook that says like, this Earth is so new and it's like still like cooling down, like in a metaphysical sense, not like geologically. So that these stories haven't fully coalesced. And if we think of all of these Earths as stories, then the idea is like maybe at one point they will maybe blend together. But right now they kind of have these sort of self-contained, worlds of each character, of Wonder Woman, of Batman, of the Teen Titans, of Green Lantern. I actually think Morrison, even themselves, anticipated that at some point there'd be like a Justice League Earth 1. But the question remains, is it a Justice League Earth 1 made up of the versions we've already seen of some of these characters, or is Justice League Earth 1 as separated from all of those as everything else? And that's the question. Now, Josh, what would be your preference for the Earth 1 thing? Would you want to see these specific things start interacting with each other, or would you want everything to kind of be its own contained thing? So even if there is a Justice League, it's like a different Justice League on Earth, Earth 1.
I do think that I would prefer that, just having read the Batman, the Superman, the Wonder Woman, the Green Lantern, throwing out the ambiguous time frames that they all take place in, seeing those characters come together is a much bigger stretch, I think, than seeing the ones that we have in like Prime Earth continuity.
Totally.
So I think it would be interesting to get almost like, this is going to be blasphemous, but a New Frontier Earth One. So we get kind of a origin of the Justice League, but an Earth One kind of darker, grittier version of it.
I totally know what you mean. I think I generally agree too, is that I kind of like that Earth One is this spot where we don't really have to worry about each other's continuity. You know, each book has its own internal one. The stuff that happens in volume 1 of Batman Earth One carries on into volume 2, but we don't have to worry about what's happening in Superman or in Green Lantern or whatever. And I agree in general, and I think that's what I would want. But I'd be lying if there's a part of me that's not a little bit curious of what it would look like to try to wrangle all of these different things. Like it would have such a weird vibe in the way that, like, when you put together like a multiverse Justice League, it has a weird vibe because
the Justice Incarnate,
different, they're from such different, even like tones of worlds. I don't want that to happen because I'd like one thing to be different than just everything is continuity. But I don't know. There's something that has been like itching at me that's kind of fascinating about it. But
okay, because Warner Brothers execs are always listening. Why can we not apply this Earth One approach to the DCEU, and instead of like trying to take all of these different ideas, right? Just let everything happen the way it's supposed to happen. That, you know what? That's a soapbox for another day.
Yeah. I don't want to wade in too deep on the Discovery stuff.
No. So with that said,
yeah, I mean, I know what you're saying, and I think for a time it's not quite the same as the Earth One thing, because the Earth One thing, everything was sort of created in its own bubble and given this title of Earth One or whatever. It's supposed to be like the young adventures of, essentially, for all these characters. But I think there was a brief time where they were like, well, we definitely aren't doing the Snyderverse, but we also don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And that's when we started getting movies that were a bit more self-contained. Like Aquaman is pretty contained. There's a couple of references to Justice League, and that's about it. Wonder Woman 1984 is pretty contained. Shazam's pretty contained. Like the Suicide Squad. Yeah, we know a couple of these characters from the first one, but we're pretty much just, leaving it as is. And then every once in a while, we get these little connective pieces. We hear, or, in Peacemaker, we see the Justice League cameos and we go, okay, oh, it's canon. But for the most part, they were kind of in their own bubbles. It's a slightly different version of it, but I think you're right that was maybe the best model for DC, was not to lean into this like perfect tapestry thing that Marvel keeps, leaning on, where every single event is like, and where was this person during that? And where was that person during that? It was better when it was a little looser.
Yeah, and I think there's something, there's a lesson there that we could take and apply to the Earth One books.
Yeah.
Everything kind of stands on its own in its own little bubble. And there could be little things in the background that you see. Like maybe we see in a Batman Earth One, we see in the background like a Ferris airspace.
Right.
But it could be fun. But yeah, I think we pretty much answered that one.
Yeah, I agree. That's great.
So moving on from Horror Fan 11, how does Scarface work? I find it hard to believe that all the underworld guys fear and respect a dummy doll. You obviously haven't been paying attention to American politics for the last 8 years.
Ooh, boom, baby. And he's allowed to say it. He's American. So,
well, that's what they tell me.
Right. So Scarface, we're talking about, this is a Batman villain. It's a ventriloquist dummy named Scarface, who's like a mob boss. But the person working the dummy, his name is Arnold Wexler, a very kind of meek, quiet fellow. And so, yeah, the point comes up of like, well, who's going to respect who in that mafia family or gang or whatever you want to call them is going to respect a meek little guy talking through a puppet? And the answer to me is, have you been to Gotham City? Gotham City's like full of stuff that I'd argue is weirder than that. And people go along with it. You know what I mean? You know, Two-Face doesn't lose credibility when they're like, should we go rob the bank? And he flips a coin and he goes, not today, boys. Like, yeah, I that's kind of a cop-out answer, but I think part of it is that Gotham is sort of a beast unto itself. And I do think that there's something unhinged about the ventriloquist, because Arnold Wexler might be meek or whatever, but Scarface, this persona that he's talking through, is not. He'll gun you down, you know? So I think anyone that maybe would speak up, like the Scarface persona is the thing that would like murder them outright, take them out with a Tommy gun sort of thing. And I think that's probably enough to keep people in line. What's your thoughts on the ventriloquist?
Pretty much in line with that. You know, as you're talking, I keep flashing back to a recent Secret Six series.
Oh, the one from the New 52?
Yes, and it had a different version of, I mean, it was the doll, but it had a different ventriloquist.
That's right. That's Peyton Riley.
Yes,
she's the second ventriloquist.
Like that one, there always seemed to be this like they were alluding to there's more to the doll than just a doll.
Yeah, that one, yeah. I don't fully remember everything in that series super clearly, so I might be speaking out of school here, but my recollection of Peyton Riley is that her thing is that she was telekinetic. So she could actually move and voice the doll beyond like traditional ventriloquism. Like Arnold Wexler had his hand up the puppet's ass the whole time.
Right.
But she could actually like move it and manipulate it. So then the question remains, is it the same Scarface? Is there something up with the doll, or is it a Chucky scenario where Wexler's Scarface persona is in the doll and then she's just animating it, or does she also have just a separate, Scarface persona?
Yeah.
And that's the piece I don't remember. It may have been touched on because I don't. Again, I'm speaking out of school here, but I don't think Peyton Riley only shows up in that Secret Six series. So.
No, if I remember, she's shown up before that. And I think, again, I'm kind of speaking out of school a little bit myself. I don't know that they ever gave a definitive answer to it. I think it's one of those things that's a little bit left up to the reader.
Totally. Yeah. And I mean, I kind of like that. I think it's one of those things where, yeah, you're right. When it's left up to the reader, it's sort of fun and intriguing. I don't know that I need an answer to whether or not it's the same Scarface or whether or not there's like something literally haunted about the dummy. But the fact that there are now multiple ventriloquists with or without powers that kind of imbue this thing with life and menace and things like that. Certainly, if he couldn't command respect before, he can now, because there's now like a myth to it, right? Like there's whether or not he's the same Scarface. That is now you're kind of raised to the level of, there's a Riddler, there's a Joker or whatever. Scarface being more than just a thing on a guy's hand kind of elevates that character a bit. He's more than just like a Falcone. He's not just a crime boss. He becomes like a super villain at that point. You know what I mean?
So at that point, he kind of takes the step past Black Mask into Two-Face.
I'd say so. I mean, to me at least. I mean, not in terms of general popularity or things like that. Obviously, I'd rather read a Black Mask story probably than a ventriloquist one. But if you think of like from the perspective of the people in Gotham or the people that might be working for Scarface or the ventriloquist, that has to be a next tier up now that there's more than one ventriloquist, but Scarface remains, right?
Yeah. And I mean, like you said, Gotham is a beast in and of itself. I mean, they've seen just ridiculous things. And so it's
constantly,
not
always.
Yeah. So taking that next step of, okay, this is not just a doll is not a big step to take.
Totally. Absolutely. Yeah. I think, yeah. Good answer. I like that. The answer is put some respect on Scarface.
Yes. Just, when he starts running at you with a knife, maybe turn around and run the other direction.
Yeah. Yeah. You say hello to his little friend.
Okay. So next question from Chemical Incident 280. What voice do you hear for Superman while reading comics?
Ooh. Well, you mentioned it off the top. You've been enjoying Action Comics and War World Saga. When you're reading that, do you hear a voice for Superman? Is it something generic?
Absolutely.
Is it one of the interpretations we've gotten before?
It is. They were so similar. It's the Tim Daly, George Newbern.
Right. Sure.
That animated series, Justice League Unlimited, that is the voice in my head. It's the voice I grew up with.
Sure.
And so everybody since then, in my mind, everybody is trying to imitate Mark Hamill's Joker voice. Everybody is trying to imitate Tim Daly's Superman voice in my head.
Right.
I know that's not actually true, but
yeah, see that's interesting. I mean, I think I have kind of the opposite experience of it. If I hear Tim Daly or George Newbern in something else, I can only hear Superman.
Yeah.
But I don't know if as I'm reading Superman, I'm only hearing them.
Okay, so what do you hear?
Oh man, I think mine is not one person's voice. I think I'm hearing a slight combination of things. I think there's definitely some of the Newbern Daily cadence in there, but I feel like I also hear a lot of the Christopher Reeve. And okay, this is a weird one because he hasn't played Superman, and actually it's a weirder one because he played Batman. But a little bit of Bruce Greenwood, there's something to Superman where even when he's meant to be 40 or whatever, 45, Superman is supposed to be this kind of compassionate and wise beyond his years, right? That's the real superpower, is that he's incorruptible and caring and that sort of thing. And so I hear a voice something similar to a Bruce Greenwood, something kind of warm, and I think of him playing Pike in Star Trek. That's the sort of thing I think I hear when I read Superman, but I don't know if I'm ever hearing a person's voice. But I do think there's elements of kind of father figures and strong leaders and things like that I'm blending together when I'm reading.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I came to the Christopher Reeve Superman movies much later.
Sure.
In my journey, so that doesn't play as big of a role for me.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's something, but it depends what the thing is too, right? It's not all the time, but if Superman ever has, when Superman saves a kid, I hear Christopher Reeve. I hear always look both ways before you cross the street. I hear that kind of shit in that moment. You know what I mean? Okay,
so it's interesting you say that, because I do think that as I've been reading, especially this current run, where Superman is visibly aged a little bit, he's not just that eternally 38.
Yeah. He's kind of got the Earth 22 Superman look with the graying temples and the,
I mean, there's definitely a little bit more gravitas to the voice,
right?
But underneath it, it's still that Newbern Daily, but there is something else there.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, interesting. Good question.
So next, from Tricky Piano 2845, who is your favorite artist in DC Comics?
Oh, geez, Louise.
Yep.
Shit. Do you know what? I'm just going to go with my gut right now. I think it might be Dan Mora.
Ooh, good call.
Dan Mora on World's Finest. He's got the kind of the sharpness and the kind of like the modernity of like Jorge Jimenez, who I also like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it's also like it feels so classic. Like I don't know that I have a good like who's the other person in between that I'm thinking of, but yeah, Dan Mora's stuff is like kinetic, exciting, clean. His faces are so expressive. He captures like energy in like sunshine and positive and it's not all about like where the shadows are and things like that. Like just broad daylight, he can capture the whole gamut of emotion in that in a superhero adventure. And it's made that book so much fun. You know, obviously Mark Waid's writing is great and tying in, you know, like we've already had like Green Lantern, Doom Patrol, and this demon and you know, ancient China, and like we're all over like 5 or 6 issues in. But yeah, I mean, that artwork really like lifts it up, because even though the stakes are there and it doesn't undercut the stakes, it's like fun to read. It's not like, well, I know someone's going to die, you know, like it's not a slog at all. So for me, yeah, just going with my gut right now, it's Dan Mora. It'll change in 3 weeks, but that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, right now, Riley Rossmo.
Oh, great call.
It was one, and I'll be honest, the first couple times I read something that they drew, I was not into it.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what would the first things have been that I would have encountered. Like maybe
Martian Manhunter.
Is that now?
They did.
Was that before Death Metal? Probably, right?
Yes, it was like a 6 or 12 issue miniseries.
Yeah, then it would have been that one, the Steve Orlando Martian Manhunter. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, like the first couple issues on that was a little weird for me, but the more I got into it, the more I read on it, especially now on the Harley series.
Right.
Love it.
Yeah, I mean, it really is kind of like project specific. Like I think you work great on Martian Manhunter. I thought it worked really well in that Robin King one shot in Death Metal, because there's a sort of chaos that works with like a child Bruce who goes nuts, you know, like that kind of worked. And then, yeah, Harley, that kind of energy, like his art style captures all of that so well. I'm trying to think of like, what's a book I absolutely would not want to see Riley Rossmo on. And it's like, to me, I think it's something like
Nightwing
Thing.
Okay. Yeah.
Did Riley Rossmo do a run on Constantine, like early Rebirth era?
Yes, I do remember that, because actually that was the first, because I was having that same thought. That was the first name that came to mind. I'm like, oh, wait, no. He did do Constantine there for a minute.
Yeah.
But I think maybe something like Nightwing, I don't think it would be great for.
Yeah, maybe something too like down the middle. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think Riley Rossmo needs to be like strategically deployed, but I've certainly like loved what I've read.
Yes.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Awesome. Nice.
All right. So next question from Dirty Doe. Okay. Dirty with a D1. Who was the Green Lantern in charge of the sector Krypton was in? And why didn't they help evacuate at least some people from the planet?
Ooh, Josh, do you know this one?
Yes, and I always get father and son mixed up. Tomar Ray.
Yes, it's Tomar Ray.
Tomar Ray was the Green Lantern in charge of Krypton.
The fin head bird person.
Yes.
He's from the planet Zudar. He's voiced by Jeffrey Rush in the movie, which is like an outrageous use of Jeffrey Rush. Yeah, he's the Green Lantern, or was the Green Lantern of Sector 2813, which is also where Zudar is. It's where Krypton was. And the new Krypton was like unstable. And they basically send Tomar Ray to get this substance called stellarium that would help like absorb energy or basically do something to like stabilize the core and stop Krypton from exploding. He picks up the stuff, and as he's flying back, a star supernova blinds him. He drops the stuff, and then he gets there too late. And that's like literally what happens.
Getting some hardcore like Spock Romulus vibes from that.
Yeah, well, yeah, actually, that's an interesting comparison. Yeah, I mean, many years apart. I'm pretty sure that Tomar Ray story happens in an issue of Superman from like the 60s or 70s. It's like a Superman issue like in the 200s. And they tell that story. So it's like a long established thing there, which is interesting. And then Tomar Ray, you know, through retcons and that became an increasingly big part of Hal's inner circle. I mean, he was even in the Silver Age, but they make him like he's like the first Green Lantern Hal meets other than Abin Sur. Like they make him a big part of it. And then and then later, you know, Tomar Ray's son Tomar 2 is implicated in goings on of the core and things like that. I only thought of this because I reread Omega Men like only a few months ago for an episode. But in that Tom King run of Omega Men, the Citadel talks about how they have, I think, like either the biggest or the only supply of stellarium. And they're talking about like which planets to save or not save or things like that. And I think it's one of very few references to that substance outside of this Tomar Ray story. But the idea that like, if that's true, then that also implicates like the Citadel's in the Vega sector, which the Green Lanterns did not patrol. They had a treaty, which we learn is because of Larfleeze, but they made other excuses. So it means a Green Lantern has to break, you know, Green Lantern's own policies, go against the Book of Oa, make a deal with the evil Citadel to get some stellarium, and then he still didn't save Krypton. Which is all a little.
If I remember, like, you know, as his story unfolds, we learn that is his greatest regret. Yeah. As a Green Lantern, his greatest regret is not being there in time. And so it's not something that like was just a passing thing. It's like, no, he carried that with him.
Totally. It's forever. Kind of it's sort of like his Xanshi, but it doesn't haunt him the same way because it wasn't really his fault. Unlike John, who like it was his fault, you know.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Not everybody's perfect.
I'm sorry. Did I come too hard for John Stewart?
Oh no, John. You come at John all you want. You come at Guy.
I would never. I have never been anything but complimentary of Guy Gardner.
From Movie Advance 101, why does Kid Flash have the same costume design as the Reverse Flash?
Right, the yellow with the red lightning bolt on it. Go for it, Josh. Go.
Oh, so if I remember right, it was a retcon later, but they retconned it that Eobard designed his costume to mimic Kid Flash's costume because all he wanted was to be the Flash's partner.
I believe you're right. That rings a lot of bells. That is like a late retcon. I don't remember if that was from maybe like the Wade run with Wally, where for a bit you actually think Barry's back and then you realize that it's Reverse Flash, or if it's an even later retcon from the John's Rebirth stuff. But yeah, that about tracks. There are some key differences. Kid Flash has red pants. It's just the top part of the costume that's reverse colored. You know, Kid Flash also has that weird mask with the hair piece cut out, the top cut out.
The light ray mask.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So he's got that. Obviously, Reverse Flash, his costume is modeled on the Flash's design. Yeah, I mean, I like the Kid Flash suit design. Actually, I think it's pretty slick. I think my favorite one, though, well, I shouldn't say one of my favorite ones was that brief period I think around Future's End, where we saw what Wallace's costume might have turned into, was that like silver and red and black Kid Flash costume. And that looked really cool. And I really liked that one. I like it better than the Impulse suit. I liked it better than like a bunch of Speedster suits. But yeah, I mean, the Kid Flash suit is pretty classic. Yeah. So I think it's a totally reasonable retcon to say that Eobard copped the style from Kid Flash.
Yeah. All right. So next question from Jerswar. What do Swamp Thing and Poison Ivy think of each other?
Ooh, well, it's funny. We get the Harley Quinn animated show version of this in a recent episode, which is very funny. I like their interpretation of Swamp Thing, that he's like a man-bunned like yoga teacher, basically. So it's pretty funny to me. Yeah, I mean, here's the thing: the Poison Ivy book right now is really dealing with some of the emotional fallout for Poison Ivy of having been way more connected to the Green. Basically, like since Heroes in Crisis and her being kind of reborn, she was like way more connected than she ever had been. She was more like on a Jason Woodrue level than she had been. And then all these things happening where she had a split identity, where there was Queen Ivy and then her, and, you know, getting rid of the Queen Ivy part and merging them back together. And now she's back to being Poison Ivy like we know her. Like, I got to imagine the Poison Ivy book does a good job of showing that she's got a very kind of nuanced self-image, if not a little, you know, bleak. But I got to imagine there's a certain level of resentment that for her, who constantly is, you know, concerned with the well-being of the Green and plant life and things like that, that Alec can, you know, keep fucking up and keep being brought back, and he gets to be the Avatar. He gets to have all the power at his disposal. He, you know, and you know, who knows what she would think of Levi Kamei. The new Swamp Thing should be like a fucking another one. Like, you know, Woodrue has been the Avatar of the Green for a bit. You know, like so many characters have had their shot at it, except for her. I got to imagine there's a level of resentment there.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, maybe. You know, but we also get a lot of that Poison Ivy that, especially in relation to her relationship with Harley, where they play up her hold on that bit of her humanity. And, you know, that's a big thing with all the Swamp Things, with, you know, the first one with Levi, with Woodrue, you know, that question of how much of your humanity is left.
Right.
And so, I mean, yeah, on some level, there might be some resentment from her end, but also, you know, if she actually knew what it took to be the Avatar of the Green and what that would mean giving up, would she give that up?
You know, and that's a great question. That's, you know, I think you're right. I think that's maybe partly what we're exploring in this book is like, yeah, Queen Ivy had the power, but she was like truly like missing that sort of soul center that Ivy has.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so then
flipping.
Yeah, vice versa. What does Swamp Thing think of Poison Ivy?
I mean, I think there's been some canonical things where he has talked about her, and he doesn't always approve of her methods, but he is approving of her passion and care for the Green.
Yeah, you know, this, you know, part of the reason that the Green plant life chooses like something flesh and blood to become their avatar is because it's about balance. So many Swamp Thing stories at this point now between the New 52 and this current Swamp Thing series, it's about like a new kingdom emerges and it thinks it's the shit and it's going to take everything over, but it has to learn for the first time what all the other kingdoms learn, which is that we're a balance and that's it. And anytime one gets too big for their britches, the other ones have to come in. So the whole reason to have an avatar like Swamp Thing is to represent that, like, keep the bigger picture in mind. Like, maybe the green could take over everything, but like, that's not good for anybody. So, yeah, I think you're right that Swamp Thing, because he also has like the collective wisdom of the Parliament of Trees. He's tapped into everything. It's like being like an atomic scientist, but talking to Captain Atom. They have two different experiences of the same thing. They're maybe both interested in, or they both have an understanding of it. But one of them is like a living embodiment of the thing and can see it from beginning to end. And the other one, it's a little narrower view or a little shorter sight. Yeah. He probably views Poison Ivy as a bit of a child, not necessarily in the condescending way, but just in that, like, you couldn't possibly know what I know or see what I see or think how I think,
It's like you think you know everything, but you haven't even scratched the surface yet.
It's a thing I'm getting very familiar with, which is like, when you're a kid and your parents, when you're like 16, you're like, I'm going to be an adult soon anyway. I can do whatever I want. And then they go like, that's not really how it works. And then me at like 35 goes like, oh my God, what a dumb thing for a kid to say. Like, you come around eventually. They say like, you won't feel that way when you're older. You go, I probably will. And then you get older and you go like, no, they were right. And it's not really talking down. It's just like, you couldn't possibly have understood it at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So next question, actually a great follow-up question to something you just said, from photojournalist Brave. Who's the wisest character in DC Comics?
Oh shit. The wisest. This is tough in a universe of characters that are constantly fucking things up.
Yeah, I mean, the cop-out answer is Shazam with the wisdom of Solomon. I mean,
but is that eminent wisdom, or is it just like a decent amount of wisdom?
I think we're led to believe that it's eminent wisdom.
I've had a lot of kind of conflicting thoughts about the wisdom of Solomon. Let's get into it here. I think that the reason the wisdom of Solomon is in there, and this is probably not a surprise, was to account for the fact that Billy is a child. Not that wouldn't have been a power that an adult champion would get, but like narratively, that's there so that you go like, well, Billy wouldn't understand how taxes work. But you go like, Solomon understands that there's like a cost to living in a society or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, there's that level.
So what we were just talking about, that like when you're 16, you say, I know everything. And then when you're 35, you realize that you knew nothing.
Exactly. I think it's to temper some of that, like that narrow view. Like, here, I'll admit something horrifying here is I remember very vividly being in grade 10 and being the most pro-Iraq war that you could be. Because I was like, if someone is bad and someone else has the power to stop them, they should do it. That's it. End of story. Aren't I smart? And I kind of like wipe my hands of it. But, then you get older, you go like, it's actually a lot more complicated than that. And so to me, that's the wisdom of Solomon is, some of the wisdom of Solomon is like knowing how magic works and knowing the rules of the Rock of Eternity and like knowing the history of things. But I also think the wisdom of Solomon is like hang on, let's be adults about this. I think that's in there. I was going to say like Phantom Stranger.
Okay.
But even then, Phantom Strangers. Well, I guess wisdom doesn't preclude, rage or things like that. Phantom Stranger can be short-sighted and stuff too. But when he's acting more in his capacity as like I can't get involved, but why don't you do a thing? he does seem to be relatively wise. When it's his own shit, he's not so much. But when he's kind of like guiding or assisting, he seems to be relatively wise.
Yeah. I may not necessarily on that level, but I would also throw out Roz as somebody who is wise to the point of he sees the long game, and
I mean,
been around enough and has seen some shit.
That's a pretty good pick too, because I mean, certainly in more modern comics, the only way they've really justified the villainy of him is the idea that the Lazarus pit is slowly driving him nuts, as opposed to him. You know what I mean? Like, he's obviously bad, his moral center is off, but yeah, I think you're right. There's a certain degree of wisdom to him. I mean, by that same token, I think you could probably throw Vandal Savage in there.
That was another one.
And there's, some good animated interpretations, I think, of Vandal Savage that lean into that idea. I think the Young Justice Vandal Savage is one of the best ones. That's a guy who's like, 11 steps ahead. So even when you beat him, he's already like, well, that was that anyway. He's already on to the next thing. I do think they do a good job of showing what does living forever do to your capacity for like reason and the big picture and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that's an important difference to make, especially between somebody like Vandal Savage and somebody like Lex Luthor.
Right.
Because the argument can be made like Lex is also 5, 6, 7 steps ahead of everybody else. But the driving force behind both of those is different. Lex is doing it because he is trying to get everything done now. Yeah. Vandal is so far ahead because he knows, okay, if this step fails, I'm not going anywhere. I can regroup in a century and it will be fine.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. There's a metaphor for this in the Scott Snyder run of Justice League, which is that when they find that piece of the totality, Luthor beats Vandal Savage to death with it. And, that is literally like Luthor is knowledge. He's smart. He's not wise. If he was wise, he would have given up the whole thing. Luthor, you're right, short-term gains. He's more short-sighted. He's extremely smart, but he's not really thinking about anything other than himself. Like, it's literally knowledge beating wisdom to death. And then what happens to Luthor? He pours all of that time and resources into being Perpetua's acolyte, and his short-sighted move from earlier in releasing the Batman Who Laughs comes back to bite him because the Batman Who Laughs supplants him. He gets kicked out. He has to eat crow, run back to the Justice League, and have to fight with them to save the day. So yeah, I think that's a great call. Yeah. Anyone else that we'd want to throw out for? I mean, we talked about the wisdom of Solomon, but I think it would be silly not to throw the Wizard Shazam.
I thought about that as well. Yeah, definitely very. I mean, was it any of the? What is that group called? Help me out. It's the Wizard
Lords
Shazam.
of Order. Or are you thinking of the quintessence?
That's it.
Right.
I like any of them. I think you could throw in there and make a solid argument for.
Yeah,
like Phantom Stranger, the Wizard, like any of that group.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, it's again, it's tough, and I think there's lots of compelling arguments for other characters that aren't on the cosmic level. We talked about Swamp Thing. I think there's a compelling argument for Swamp Thing. I think there's a good argument for Dr. Fate. I think there's a good argument for Wonder Woman. I think there's I think there are some strong arguments for a lot of characters being wise. But maybe tough to define the actual power ranking.
Okay, so I'm going to throw one more out there for you.
Sure.
Somebody that you've been bringing up a lot lately.
Okay.
Aztec.
Yeah, see.
So Aztec, he gets, and here's my reasoning, right? Aztec, the current Aztec, just a man, but the helmet imbues him with all the knowledge of all the Aztecs that have come before him. So I think there's an argument that could be made that fairly wise individual.
I guess that depends on who the Aztec is and how far along they are. You know what I mean?
Sure.
You're right. They're equipped with all that knowledge, and I guess the difference is how do they use it? So the same thing could also be said of Swamp Thing by the same logic, right? Being tapped into your predecessor's memories and things like that doesn't immediately give you the judgment that I think is part of the wisdom equation.
Right.
It certainly can.
Yeah, because I guess
all the tools or whatever. Because I mean, even for Aztec, if we're talking about Kurt Falconer, if we're talking about Uno, Aztec, fulfills the prophecy in a way by fighting what he knows as Tezcatlipoca, which is Mageddon. And he detonates his suit. He basically he creates like a 4-dimensional explosion sort of thing. But it still only like wounds Mageddon. Now, it gives Superman the opportunity to exploit a weakness and save the day, but like, is the wisest course of action to take the thing you are destined to do and kind of throw it away that quick? I like Aztec, but I might throw out there that that's not that wise. It's maybe smart and it worked, but I'm not sure it was wise.
Fair. Okay.
We're splitting hairs left, right, and center here because the definition of wisdom's pretty ambiguous, I think.
It reminds me a lot of the who's the smartest person in the DC universe conversation.
Totally.
Because it could go either way. You could make arguments for 100 different people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or beings.
Yeah, not just people.
Yes. Right. So moving on from JJ Hahn with 3 N's. What made you fall in love with DC Comics?
Oh, geez, Louise. Josh, what made you fall in love with DC Comics?
So growing up, when I was but a wee kid, small individual, whenever my mom would go to the grocery store and take me with her, we had this grocery store in town that at the front of it had this like animatronic farm set up that you could like put your kids at, and it would entertain them for 15 minutes while you ran and grabbed everything.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, right there next to that was an old school spinner rack.
Nice.
And it was Batman, Superman, like very kid friendly comics, but DC Comics. And like from that, just superheroes were always kind of there in the background for me. And then really got into, like, I remember watching the Batman the Animated Series and Justice League and Static Shock and all those when I was a kid. But then in college, a buddy of mine gave me a graphic novel to read. Not a DC one, not a big name one, but it was Wanted.
Oh, sure. Right.
And from Wanted, I gave it back to him like, okay, like, beyond just this one, like I'm digging the whole graphic novel thing.
Right.
What's the next one to give? What's the next one to do? Which was Watchmen.
Yeah. So big leap from Wanted, but big leap. Yeah, you should read Watchmen. Yeah.
Right. And so like from Watchmen, I'm like, okay, cool. Which opened the question of, okay, where did he get the idea for these characters, and transition that into DC and just started picking things up. And I remember the first DC book I picked up specifically was a collected Blackest Night.
Right.
And so started reading that, which like, okay, I dig this character. I'm vibing with this person, and just started branching out from there. But I guess specifically back to the question, what made me fall in love with it? I mean, I try to trace it back, and I think it goes back to like, I was more interested as a kid in that spinner rack of picture books than I was in this animatronic interactive like farm setup that I could go play on and climb on.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I've said it to death on the podcast. I grew up, the comics that I owned, the only comics I owned for a very long time were ones I got from my dad. So they were kind of all sort of like early 70s, early to late 70s, it's just the whole decade. 70s issues of Flash, Legion of Superheroes, Justice League of America. Also had like some Marvel comics in there, like a bit of a run of Invincible Iron Man and a couple issues of Captain America and some stuff like that, Daredevil. And I had those for a long time, and I would read them and I liked them, but other than that, it was mostly me watching cartoons or stuff like that. And I always liked comics, but it never became a thing. I wasn't going and picking up comics when I was a kid. And then when I was like fully an adult, I had that moment where it was like, oh, I can have pie for dinner. But my moment was like, oh, I can get comics whenever I want. And I started doing that. And I always watched like the animated movies, and I watched all the shows, and I watched superhero movies whenever they come out. So I was always kind of in it. But then I started like watching, I think the thing that maybe cracked it for me is I was watching the DC Showcase shorts.
Mm-hmm.
And in particular, that Green Arrow one, because it had Black Canary in it. It had Malcolm Merlyn in it, and it had Count Vertigo in it. And I was like, who the fuck are these people? And then like, I think this was maybe just before I was watching Young Justice and stuff too. And I was like, who are these people? And then I'd look up Count Vertigo, and I'd be like, Green Arrow has an archenemy. And then I got obsessed with finding out who everyone's archenemy was. And I'd like go to the wiki and I'd read about them, and I'd do that sort of thing. And I'd kind of like trying to do all the pairings. And I'd be like, hey, Black Lightning has Tobias Whale. And yeah, like Green Arrow has Count Vertigo. And I was trying to go through and do it for everyone that I could think of, that I could find. And just going through all that, I was like, man, there's so many of these like characters and people I haven't heard of, and crazy stories, and I just have a good memory for that stuff. So then I also wouldn't lose it. And then for me, then I was like, well, I'm just back in. And I started getting monthly pulls, and I'm talking about it slightly out of order, but I think the thing that really got me back in monthly is not. I did a little bit at the start of the New 52, and then fell off a bit. But the thing that got me back in was Forever Evil, because I read an article and I was like, the villains are getting a book, like, say more. And then, yeah, it was right around there. Like a lot of my New 52, like floppy collections would like start at like issue like 24, 25, which is around when Forever Evil was happening. And I've since gone back and filled out a lot of them, but a lot of them started around there, because that was the one where I was like, well, I'm obviously interested in this. And then I was reading, it's like the Crime Syndicate, who the fuck are they? And I was like getting really deep into all of that stuff. So I guess that's the how. I would say the why I love it is I fumbled the ball saying this on a previous episode, but I saw something online. They put it in a really good way, which is like in Marvel, when you pick up a Daredevil comic, you're reading about Matt Murdock, and he happens to be Daredevil. And the Daredevil stuff's cool as shit. And it's awesome. But you're reading Matt Murdock. Like, you're also seeing his life and things like that. And in DC, you're reading about Batman, and he happens to be Bruce Wayne. Or you're reading about Green Lantern, and he happens to be Hal Jordan or whomever. And it's not necessarily at the expense of character things, but it's not the focus. The focus is these sort of like the powers, the beings, the sort of like mythic thing. And I'm a sucker for myth. I love like Lord of the Rings. I love Greek mythology. That's my shit. I'm into it. So I think DC was always going to naturally settle in that spot, because as much as I like superheroes in general, I love like legends. And so that I think that was always going to happen.
No, absolutely. I mean, I grew up growing up, I would always pick up the Greek mythology or the Roman mythology or the Norse mythology, like any mythology book I could get my hands on from the library.
Yeah.
Like, I pick that up and read it just because I find those stories fascinating. And I guess partially just like the extreme just fucked upness of those families and just how messed up they are, but also the stories and the wild adventures and
you know, and they were, and you know, so many of those mythologies, like those gods are flawed and they lived among us and they fucked up, and then they have their own internal stories too. So there's stories of people and them, and then there's also stories of the shit that happened between them, their drama and stuff like that. And like, if there's a more one-to-one, you know, kind of like meta narrative than the Olympians and the DC heroes, I'd love to hear it. But like, truly, you know, they have their own internal things. They do these things that like affect the world. You know, that's the thing I always liked to like in Lord of the Rings, that like the War of Wrath like breaks the continent. You know, like the map of Middle Earth that we know from Lord of the Rings is not how Middle Earth started out. It's not what it looked like, but they broke the world fighting Morgoth so hard. And I love that kind of shit. And that feels like a very comic booky thing to me too.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no, there's definitely that aspect of the mythology and the universal scale of it that's a lot of fun.
Totally.
And I don't know, as somebody who has always taken things probably a little bit too seriously, like there is a big part of it for me that it's an escape.
Totally.
Like I get to, and it's one of the reasons why I've like outside of just the larger DC, when it comes right down to it, it's Barry Allen for me.
Right.
Like Barry Allen is the reason that I love DC. And it's, you know, pre-Flashpoint, the thing that drew me to it is he like didn't have anything bad happen.
Right.
He was just a dude that like he got a gift and he wanted to use it to help people. And like, reading his adventures was very much this just escape from everything else. Like it was light. It was fun. He was having fun. He was enjoying it. Him and Wally were just best buds and going on adventures together.
Totally. I mean, for a while, at least, the worst thing that happened to him was a bunch of chemicals spilled on him and he was struck by lightning, and that made him a superhero. So that wasn't that bad. And that was such a fine thing to happen that Wally just fully recreates it. Another lightning bolt and more chemicals, and it just makes another Flash. There's no like, oh shit, he did it wrong. There's no like, it just happens. It's fine. Basically, I mean, up until whenever it is in the late 70s when Thawne kills Iris, and that's like, so you get from like 1956 to like almost 20 years of Barry just being like, life's a breeze.
Yeah. Like he was just living his best life, running around, saving people.
Totally.
There's something that just really resonated with me with that.
I think that's totally fair. I think it's, I don't think, I mean, people have their favorites, but I think there's no shame in enjoying a character as uncomplicated as Barry Allen. I would argue that even the retcons done to Barry, he's still probably the least complicated main character in DC. You know, I think his shit is less fucked up than Hal's or, you know, anyone else's. So
for sure.
Yeah. No, I love that. That's great.
All right. So next question from Pokey Destined. Why isn't Zatanna called in to solve every major problem?
Oh, because then the book would be boring.
But also Sanderson's laws of magic.
Yeah, I mean, there's always the cost and consequence piece with magic. And it doesn't have to be as dire as the shit that was happening like post No Justice, where like she couldn't use magic at all or else the Upside Down Man would get out. Like it doesn't have to be that bad, but there's always that, like, the more you use magic for gain, something has to outweigh it. It has to counterbalance it. And it doesn't even have to be selfish gain, but like there's always a price, right? And so, yeah, even if they were like, Zatanna, you could just handle this, she would probably be like, it's best if I don't just handle this.
Yeah. Because I mean, what's the cost for her to come in and magic away Darkseid during Final Crisis?
Sure.
Like,
yeah.
Like that universe level cost. There's a lot to pay there.
Yeah, and let's keep just not talking about the elephant in the room, which is that like they got to sell comics and they need to be interesting. But but like if let's say you set up a world where you do make Zatanna solve everything. Let's say she's even somewhat managing the magical cost of these things. You're basically turning her into like a living weapon, even if it's a weapon for good. Like you basically robbed her of agency and life if her role becomes, to quote MCU Tony Stark, a suit of armor around the world. If that's what she's doing, she's not being her. She doesn't get a life. She doesn't get anything. If anything, she's a vessel. That like you're getting into the grimmest kind of Dr. Fate territory, like where Naboo is like, fuck it, order. And what's the most orderly? Death. Like you're getting into that territory, that like Dr. Manhattan removed from humanity sort of territory if you put Zatanna in that position, I think.
You're right. And selling comics, it's one of the things that I feel like DC struggles with an extent with Superman. Superman is called in to solve every problem, and he's kind of become that ultimate weapon. And so the struggle now is writing stories. And this was what would happen to Zatanna, is how do we write a story that humanizes her and causes her to struggle if she just comes in and says something backwards and the day is saved every single time?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there needs to be more to it. She's a more compelling character. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's awesome to see her do something easy. Like that's part of the magic of it too. But she can't do the big things easy. Like there has to be a something. There has to be like a, I've never done this spell before. Or the fact that like maybe she says a thing backwards and she says like get out, but like her backwards spells are seldom specific. She's usually saying like bind him, but it's like bind who and with what and how and what's holding that binding, and like that's all of the ambiguity where the magic creeps in. Like, is it taking part of her soul? Is it like what? It could be anything. And writer can decide that later on, or can decide it in the story, or doesn't have to touch it. It depends on the degree of ease that particular encounter requires. But like, that's the thing that's compelling, is like every time she does that, even if it's the exact same spell, it could be doing something different.
Yeah, was it the Yiz?
Right.
They have to be very, very specific and very, very careful with what they ask for, because if they are ambiguous at all, it will go wrong.
I think that's a really fun thing that they do in season 2 of Stargirl, is them trying to figure out like, how can we ask the Thunderbolt to do this thing? And like, it always ends up being this crazy long sentence because they have to like cover every loophole.
But not like this, but with that, and not like that, but do it this way.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So moving on. My username is awful. Could Flash fly by flapping his arms fast enough?
Ooh, flapping? Probably not, because I don't think. Well, yeah, I mean, we're already talking about superpowers. It's a little crazy.
Right.
Flash's traditional flight method is the tornado arms thing, like to spin them.
Yes.
And then he can make himself fly. The flapping thing, Ooh.
The flapping thing reminds me of, oh man, it was a YouTube video I watched a while back that they looked at Chun-Li from Street Fighter.
Right.
Right. So her signature move is the helicopter kick.
Right.
And so this video examined that and basically was asking the question of, could a human get their leg going fast enough like that to actually propel themselves over the ground like she does in the game? And the answer was technically yes, but it's too much for humans to do. So I would think that by that logic, outside of the tornado arms, that he could flap up and down and create enough downforce by doing it to at least levitate up off the ground.
Yeah. Here's where I'm getting hung up on it, and I'm by no means a physicist. So the flapping motion, right? Big part of it is that our arms are narrow, right? A bird's wing versus our arm, like our arms are narrow. So there's not a lot of surface area to push air down, like, because that's what you're doing, right? You have to push off stuff. So he's moving really fast, but he's got a narrow arm, which means he's kind of cutting through the air like a knife. So then the question is, if that's this much force, how many times would he have to do it, let's say in a second, to counter that? So where a bird might need one flap, he might need whatever. Let's insert 1,000. Could he flap his arms 1,000 times in a second? Yes, he's the Flash. But is that is that enough to do it? And like, yeah, I think you're onto the right track where it's like he could probably like get off the ground, but I don't know that he could fly.
Right. Because he could do it in place, but to direct it is going to be a whole different thing. That's where the tornado arms come in.
Yeah. And to sustain it and all of that sort of thing. You know, even birds, you know, like there are very few birds that can keep flapping hard for a long time. You know, a hummingbird is like one of very few birds that sort of has nonstop flapping. You know, big birds, you know, even though they still have hollow bones, but like eagles and shit, they rely on thermals, right? Like they rarely flap their wings. You know, so if you keep extrapolating that, it's like flapping is actually like the worst way to fly at the size of the Flash, even with his superpowers. So yeah, I think maybe he could like lift off the ground, but I don't think he could fly like that.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. Yeah.
I like those kind of questions where I have to all of a sudden be like, what did my textbook in grade 9 say about force?
So I go back to my brother is a doctor of aerospace engineering. My brother's a rocket scientist.
Oh, holy shit.
Yeah. So like I go back to our like Friday night conversations of, have I asked him this while I was high? I think so. Probably. What did he tell me?
Oh, holy shit. That's awesome.
So yeah, I have a scientist in my back pocket I can pull out whenever I have things like this come up. It's nice. It's nice to have.
You don't have to blow up his spot, but does he work private or does he work like NASA?
He works private. He does things. He builds airplane simulators.
Whoa, that's cool as shit.
Yeah. So I actually got to go up earlier this summer. His place that he works at hosted this open house. It's like all the family members of people that work there could come up and go fly the simulator that they have.
Oh, hell yeah.
And it's like up in this huge hangar. It's on like gyros, so it like moves and shakes.
Right, yeah.
You're sitting in the cockpit and they have every airport in the world programmed into this thing with real-time weather update.
Oh, that's so cool.
It's like you're flying around and have to go in and it was wicked. And they can program it to feel like everything from a 747 to an F-35 to whatever you want. I mean, it was one of the coolest things I've ever done.
That's really cool. I'm super jealous. Yeah.
Yeah. He was telling us about this. Sorry, I'm going to quick aside, but yeah, he's telling us about this one night at dinner. He's like, yeah, we do an open house like every year or so. And Jackie, my partner, she looks at him, she goes, and you've never mentioned it before now. Why? Because all of us, every single one of our member of my family turned to him and goes, you mean we could be flying the plane? He goes,
oh, that's amazing. Yeah.
It's like, dude,
that's so goddamn cool.
Yeah. No, it was really cool. It was a highlight. It was a highlight of the summer for sure.
Oh, that's amazing. I love that.
All right. So next question from Commercial Mix 2633. Would anyone buy an Aquaman prequel miniseries featuring Atlanta, Queen of Atlantis, detailing her origin, her relationship with Orvax Marius, and her adventures encountering other matriarchs in the DCU like Hippolyta, Nerissa, and Cindella? Perhaps a visit to Scartaris too?
I mean, listen, I love that idea. If the answer is would anyone buy it? Yes, of course they would. But
you would be at the top of that pre-sale list.
I mean, yeah, it's like that's like a book almost entirely built for me in the way that like Aquaman, Green Arrow, Deep Target was. Yeah, I mean, I think so, but do I think it's maybe a deep enough well? Maybe not. But I do like this secondary pitch of the sort of the secret history of the DC moms. Like I kind of, there's a part of me that really enjoys that.
Okay, so how about this? Let me pitch you something a little bit different.
Sure.
Because while it would be cool, I don't know that Atlanta has the name recognition to carry a miniseries on her own.
Right.
So what I could see though is a Mira miniseries that's telling two parallel stories. You have like the main story is Mira going around like as she's assuming queendom over Atlantis, like she's pilgrimaging basically to all of these other places and meeting with these other monarchs, matriarchs, right, to learn what it's like to be queen and how to do that. While at the same time, the secondary story is you're seeing Atlanta take this same journey centuries before.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I love that stuff. It's a thing I liked in Endless Winter is that there was this like secret team up of Hippolyta and Black Adam and Viking Prince. And like, it's the thing I liked about Demon Knights, that there was, Madame Xanadu and Etrigan and Vandal Savage and, Sir Yiston and all of that kind of stuff.
These people have been around for centuries on this planet in the DC universe, and we're supposed to assume that they've never interacted before now? That's ridiculous. Of course they have.
It certainly makes sense in terms of those like kind of like magic adjacent societies, right? Like the Amazons, the Atlanteans. That makes sense. Cindella in the question is an interesting pull. And that's Zatanna's mother. So she's one of the Homo Magi. Like that's an interesting pull. I kind of like that idea. It would be interesting to have like a previous, because we mentioned them earlier, a previous Aztec or like, maybe there's a female Swamp Thing or, like whatever the thing is. I do enjoy this idea of like, I always like a secret history thing. I always like, we never told you this, but actually 50 years ago, the council was convened and we, I'm a sucker for that kind of shit. They set up, I think in a story that involved Atlanta, they set up like an ancient connection, or they explored rather an ancient connection between Atlantis and Gorilla City, like make a new gorilla character, make Solovar's mom or whatever, like just put other stuff in there, all these kind of like magic societies, a previous Vixen, whatever, all of these kind of things. I'm super into that idea. And I think you're right that the framing device of having like an actual lead character, but then we have this sort of B plot or this parallel storytelling that involves the earlier era. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I would be 100% down for that. I love that shit.
Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was our last question. So you know what that means.
Oh my
Now
God.
it's time for everybody's favorite game. Can you guess the name of that character based on how somebody who does not read comic books can describe that character to us?
That is the best that's ever been said.
If you don't know how this game is played, I sent a photo of a DC character to my partner who does not read comic books, and she sent back 4 clues describing that character.
Oh my God.
Are you ready?
This is such like this feels like I woke up on Earth 1. I'm ready.
Okay. First clue.
Okay.
Weird, furry boobs.
Weird, furry boobs?
Yes.
Cheetah.
No.
Hang on. Weird, furry boobs. Giganta. Another clue, please.
Next clue. His kink is obviously teabagging people.
Lion mane. Furry boobs and teabagging people.
To be fair, the teabagging is fairly picture specific.
Sure. It's not. Well, no, I guess I already said cheetah, but it's not the like. What's his name? Sebastian Ballesteros, like the male cheetah that there was. Is it?
I was not kind to you. I'm sorry.
Is it Red Lion? Okay. Next clue, please.
Looks like a gargoyle just jumped off of a building.
Ooh. Is it like is it a demon? Is it like Wrath, Gast, Abnegazar? A gargoyle just jumped off a building. Furry boobs, teabagging people. Last clue.
This is heinous. This is the shit nightmares are made of.
Is it like Animal Man, but like when he could do the mid transform sort of shit?
No, you're so far off.
Oh fuck. Okay. Give me a second here. Furry boobs, teabagging people, gargoyle jumping off a building, and it's heinous. This is the thing, the stuff nightmares are made of. Is it Monkey Prince? Is it is it like Penguin or Emperor Penguin, or is it shit? Aries or Black Bison or Super Chief or shit. I'm like nowhere near it. Eh?
No, you're not. Not even close.
Is this one going to make me angry?
Unlikely.
Oh, okay. Is it Monster Boy from the Legion?
No.
Is it? I'm getting too hung up on the animal thing. I got to leave that alone. I need. Okay. Teabagging, gargoyle, and this is the stuff nightmares are made of. It's not like an actual gargoyle. It's not like Goldie, is it? It's shit. I don't know it. I'm not going to get this one.
Okay, I just sent you the picture.
Oh, okay, shit. All right, here. Let's have a look here. Okay, you just sent the picture through. I'm opening it right now. Oh shit! Oh, is that Barbatos or no? Is that that's like
Skyhook?
Oh shit! Well, I mean, listen, those clues are very good. I can't argue with that. Is that from Superwoman? Is that what this is?
Yes, I think that was where that image is pulled from.
Oh shit! Yeah. Well, yeah, serves me right for not having that ready to go. Damn. It's like the owl version of Barbatos.
Basically, yes.
Yeah. Well, shit. That was a very good one. Well played, sir. Well played. And kudos to your partner for putting up with weird requests like that.
I sent her a couple examples of beforehand of like, okay, look, this is how it works. Will you help?
That's awesome. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, Josh, thank you so much for jumping in and helping out with the episode today. Tell the people where they can find you if you want them to find you.
I mean, why not? Go for it. I am at the real Josh Gill on pretty much every platform out there. I occasionally post some things on my Instagram. I just do a whole lot of scrolling though, trolling really.
That's me on TikTok. I haven't posted in forever. I'm just
see. I am dragging my feet on TikTok. I don't know. Instagram. I'm comfortable there.
It's fair.
Nice. It's simple. I have it curated to be just exactly what I want it to be. I don't know that I want to venture too far out of my little safe.
That's fair. The algorithm on TikTok is very good, but it's a little bit like staring into the abyss and having it stare back at you.
Yeah, that's what I'm worried about.
Yeah. Oh man. Well, thank you so much for joining us. For everyone listening at home, you can send questions in for next week's episode, which is about superheroes in song. We're talking about DC comics references in music, or like amazing soundtracks from DC stuff. Anything kind of combining DC comics and music, basically, is what we're talking about next week. That was decided on by
on the doc scored. On the doc scored, we're taking over unders on how many times you break into "Somebody Save Me."
Oh my
during
God.
that episode.
So much. Do you know what's really funny? Actually, it's funny that you bring that up because I just got my hands on. I've read it digitally a bunch, but I finally have physically. I've got the first volume of Action Comics from the New 52, and in that first issue, like young Superman in his t-shirt is holding this guy up on a balcony, and he says, "Somebody save me," and I out loud did it at home. So yeah, I mean that's going to be a tough over under race, I think. But send those questions. You can send them to all our usual platforms. So we Dr. DC Podcast on Facebook and Instagram, at Dr. DC on Twitter and TikTok. You can email them, drdcpodcast@gmail.com. Send them to our subreddit, r/Dr_DC. Doc phone is always open, 208-917-3238. It's 208-917-DCEU. If you're nasty. Thank you. We've got a website. It's drdcpodcast.com or .ca. Like I said, next week's theme is chosen by the Golden Age patrons. If you want to be a patron, go over to patreon.com/Dr. DC. There's a $1, $5, $7 level. They all give you access to the Docscord, our awesome fan community. And at the higher levels, you get bonus episodes, you get theme polls, you get videos, all sorts of fun stuff that helps to support us. And if that's not enough for you, we have another podcast that Richard and I do until I replace him with Josh over there too. And that's called Ghost Facers, a Supernatural Rewatch, where we're going through every single episode of the CW's Supernatural. We're almost done season 5 at this point, but we talk about real world monster lore, behind the scenes stuff about the show. It's a ton of fun over there. What am I forgetting? Reviews. Get those reviews in. Let's get to 200. Let's get that Lord of the Rings miniseries. Let's force Richard into it. And yeah, I think that's everything. Thank you again, Josh.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right. Well, adios.
Bye, guys.
Heroes. They always fight for what is right. Live with danger and adventure. They are men of might.
This was a Brain Freeze podcast.